Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for attending the Driving Real Dollar Returns During ERP Implementations WebEx, brought to you by VERDANTIS today feels like the 9th of February. So again, the MDM Perspective on Driving Real Dollar Returns During ERP Implementations. Just a little bit about me. My name's Arthur Raget. I'm one of the founders of VERDANTIS, and for those of you who might have heard me before, the one thing you can count on from me and, of course, from the company overall is we are very passionate about bringing real-world results through practical applications of technology to help organizations meet their business performance requirements. We get very excited about this. It's great from a master data perspective to be able to exercise our expertise in a domain that drives very practical return on investment numbers that pass muster with chief financial officers. Today's session will really focus on some of the business challenges we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months. And look at those challenges from a master data perspective. Additionally, see how we can realize positive opportunities to overcome some of these challenges, again, from an MDM perspective. Then we'll drill a little bit more into sort of the, what kind of challenges or issues come up that define or highlight the need for master data quality improvement, MDQI. And then how do we move into a space where once that need is identified, that solution sets and approaches can be sort of milled from the vast number of solution providers out there, and then how existing projects as well as potential projects can be evaluated on their own merit. Last but not least, and we'll spend about half our session today on this last bullet, we'll run through 2 or 3 business cases, as well as sort of deep dive into an ROI calculation for one of our customers. Now, with that being said, as questions come up, and I do expect questions, I welcome questions as well, please go ahead and enter those into your WebEx chat window. And we'll have time at the end to bring up and to answer those questions that seem to be worthwhile for the general audience. And anything that is very specific, we'll take offline and do specific follow-ups. With that, I do want to let everyone know that if you're having trouble with the audio or the video, do feel free to ping either of the VERDANTIS marketing folks that are online, and they can help you through sort of any connection challenges. And I am told that this is being recorded, so it will be posted, and you'll be able to catch our replay later, so no need to take copious notes. With that, let us begin. So common business challenges, and what we've seen increasingly over the last 6 to 12 months, often focus around, competitive pressures. And if we start in the upper left-hand quadrant there, rising competition, it may sound obvious, but geographical boundaries have simply gone away in the last decade, right? The world is flat. We've all read the book. But we often think in terms of global competition being competitors in other places competing for our customers here. When what we've seen increasingly over the last, say, 6 to 18 months is that the competition is both for our customers, but also for those limited resource supply chain. So this geographic competition in bringing out sort of the limited resources is both direct compete for things that we all need to manufacture our goods. But we're also seeing a sort of a boom in M&A business or merger and acquisition across these organizations. A lot of this is for natural resource, whether it's oil, gas, coal, steel, iron. And this is limiting the source of supply for many people. This is also increasing the price. And of course, that has an impact on our ability to compete. Moving to the upper right, we've seen an increasing amount of uncertainty in the market, and not just due to this sort of constriction of the supply base, but also new ways of doing business. Years ago, and okay, I'm showing my age, we used to say, we've been Amazoned, right? The brick and mortar has gone away to an online presence, a more virtual world. And now increasingly people have been Ubered, right? The competition is now networked. They're independent. It's not a big thing you can see coming. It's almost a grassroots, slow build out, whether it is something like an Uber or something like a Upwork or Elance. In order to come against this kind of dynamic change, companies are now putting risk mitigation and risk planning, or really sort of measuring the uncertainty factor, at the top of their to-do list when it comes to annual plans. And a lot of this has been enabled through the tech advancement that we look at in the lower right-hand quadrant. New technologies are simply disruptive. The ability to pop an app, find a network provider of something, whether it's writing, whether it's engineering. I need a spot welder to come in for a couple of days, or I need a freelance group to take a rig down in Texas, or I just need a lift to the airport. And this same kind of flexibility that is wreaking havoc on the supply chain is empowering the consumer, whether it is a B2C or a B2B environment. The demands are now information at fingertip, and legitimately or very much at that fingertip. Customers are now used to having whatever information they need directly in front of them. And increasingly, that means on a mobile device. And they're using this mobile device to do their research before they make a buy decision. Whether that buy decision is for a fast-moving consumer good in the store or a small appliance, or in order for a distribution channel that could be worth several, tens of millions of dollars. Now, that may sound very dramatic, but if we look at the trend, the business consumer is as attached to their mobile or their cell phone as they used to be to their tablet or to their laptop, and in the old days, back to the desktop. Now, how does MDM play into any of these? What kind of master domains affect the consumer, the customer, the channel? And these fall into the major areas that we've come to know and love from a master data management perspective. Right? Customers. We want to manage our customers. We want to share them with our distribution channel. We want to limit their exposure to the dealer network. We want to be able to cross-sell and upsell based on information in the product master. Product master is built from discrete components that we get from our material master, which comes from our suppliers in the supplier master, right? Very straightforward, but why do we care about these particular master tables? How can they affect our business? Well, starting at the value chain side, or rather the beginning of the supply chain, we'll move into the value chain. We're looking at cost containment or controlling costs. Right, high costs certainly are an issue. But with new technologies and efficiencies, we should be able to control costs even better. What we see here is the growth of the material master and to some degree the vendor master from a discipline perspective, that in today's frequently consolidating businesses gives you the ability to identify equivalent parts with equivalent value due to same quality and lower cost, so that alternate sources of supply can be identified from the market and can be leveraged. What this brings for at least most of our customers is the ability to reduce unit cost, the ability to tie better sources of supply, so that means lower on-hand inventory, thus freeing cash. And then the extension of that supply chain so that the cost of inventory can reside with a 3PL or with the supplier themselves. This is just financial efficiencies that are piggybacked on top of operational efficiencies. Now, what gets interesting is this becomes a level of process integration increasingly. I mean, from what we read and when we talk to the folks at Gartner about master data and its extension outside of the four walls, whether they are physical or whether it's virtual, master data management, master data governance is now something of a shared process between parties. So having well-defined, well-structured information in your master data tables enables different organizations to act upon that information in a way that suits them. And that organization could be a trading partner, it could be a distributor or a dealer, and you're sharing your customer information. Or it could be a consumer sharing your product information. We want to make sure that those frequent Yelp posts at least refer to the right model and version of your product, right? So having good product information that is pushable and in multiple format out to the edge of the organization in front of the consumer is part of that sales process, the acquisition and the capture, as much as we talk about the process of buying goods and or services and managing that goods acquisition through the material master and your supply chain into your catalogs. So what we're seeing is a way to sort of counter competitive pressure to reduce costs and improve margin. It's all about managing data better. This is not, I think, rocket science. This is not brand new, but I think it has finally hit mainstream and then some. 4 or 5 years ago, if you and I were talking, I would have said a lot of this is cutting edge. Only 20% of our customers are doing this. Now I look at our current customer base, and I can safely say that between 85 and 90 are managing data from supply chain through value chain, and they're doing it consistently and holistically and with a view of that. And at each and every single point is that hub of master data. Now, there are points in every organization sort of life cycle. And granted, a lot of our clients are, 100 plus years old, but maybe if we sort of refine our window a little bit, in any given 5 to 7 year cycle, there are certain times when the need for master data quality improvement becomes more apparent, where that need is now higher than a G, it's a nice to have. And we'll step through 3 different trigger points. The first is the ERP installation or ERP consolidation trigger. An ERP or an EAM, if you're super asset intensive, right, is a core component to every company. It is effectively, some kind of combination of the structure and the lubricant that lets information move across the enterprise effectively. And its use of master data is, obviously core and phenomenal. When we see customers who are implementing a new ERP, they're flashing over, they're moving to SAP or moving from SAP to something new, or they're consolidating, they have expectations on what they're going to do with this new system. The expectation is that they're going to have information at their fingertips, actionable information that's going to help them make better decisions to improve their business. This is the absolute perfect time to clean up your data, to normalize data from multiple sources, to deduplicate data, to increase the granularity and specificity of the technical characteristics of the things that you buy and the things that you sell, to deduplicate those people that you sell to deduplicate and cleanse those people that you buy from. It's the right time to do this. If you don't, you end up with a new system. You've gone through all of the cost, all of the time delay of implementing something new, and you are no better off in terms of actionable information or enterprise transparency and visibility. And for those of you who are staring at the screen going, where do I find the money? Right? What we've seen is data quality budget for an ERP consolidation is less than 10% of your total ERP budget. And for any given domain, it's usually less than 3% of your total budget. Small price to pay to basically guarantee positive results. Now, a second trigger point for master data quality improvement. And this one, I have to say, is really limited to generally two, maybe three of the major master data domains. And this is mergers and acquisitions. Comfortably, between 50 and maybe between 40 and 70% of our customers joined our family as a result of a merger or acquisition. And let's face it, there's really very few mergers. They're mostly acquisitions. They just call them mergers to make everyone feel good. So if I look at the acquisition model, one of the CEOs started off by talking to their board and said, you know what, if we buy our third or our fourth largest competitor, we can consolidate market share and comfortably surpass one of our other top competitors. Additionally, if we combine our buying power, we'll see economy of scale, and we'll be able to take 100 million or 200 million of expense out of our combined bottom line. Board says, yay, love it. Go talk to the shareholders. CEO talks to the shareholders, makes the pitch. Hey, if we do this buy, we're going to have some cross-sell, some upsell. We're going to increase our sales. I don't know by how much. Nobody ever quotes that. But they're always really pretty exact about we're going to take 50, 100, or 200 million of costs out of the equation in this combined entity. This sounds good. Shareholders say, yay. Transaction goes through. And now the fun begins. The CEO said it. The company did it. The shareholders voted on it. But now who actually drives the financial performance? This wonderful little target that is part of the annual report and part of the public record on an analyst call has now been handed off to your CFO, your head of supply chain, or your VP of manufacturing or operations. Somebody just got saddled with a $100 million bogey for the next 12 to 24 months. This is where data consolidation, specifically for the materials, things that you buy that are part of your direct value chain, raw material, component, discrete parts, as well as your operations, maintenance, repair items, come directly into play. Secondary to that is also the ability to deduplicate suppliers. But if we think about the impact for material, we've got a number of customers where 40, 50, 200 million in 12 to 18 months has been both the goal and very pleasantly for all, the result. The third trigger point that we see is process improvement. Now, we say process improvement, everybody wants to improve every day. We're all humans. It's part of the human condition. We should always get better. But then again, there are more significant process improvement changes, such as outsourcing your supply chain or your procurement, or my favorite, creating a shared services center within your organization. If your company has grown through mergers and acquisitions over the years, someone may have done the analysis to realize that there's enough commonality in process, and there may be enough commonality in both the supply chain from a vendor's perspective, but also supply chain from a material perspective, and maybe from a logistics and shipping, and maybe from HR, and maybe even finance. So we've helped a number of our customers implement systems for shared services. Some of them have created separate tracking stocks even. Right? So what we have is the creation of a shared services entity that effectively takes over the non-value add processing for each line of business and brings that together into a common operation. Now, where does master data play here? Here it's really twofold. One is the original presumption or assumptions that an organization goes through to determine whether or not a shared service operation is the right approach is by and large based on the quality of the master data to begin with. Right? The employee master, the customer master, not so much, but the employee master, the vendor master, material master. And then in terms of ongoing care, feeding, and funding of the shared services organization, you're looking at what kind of annual improvements have been made. Cost reduction, employee satisfaction, reduced turnover, lower inventory, right? There are things that are human, and human things are very important, don't get me wrong. But for every one of our customers who's come to us with a human benefit. Oh, we'll be more productive. Our people will find things faster. We're going to be that much more efficient. We know it. We love it. They know it. They love it. The CFO doesn't love it so much. What he's looking for is hard currency savings, whether it's dollars, yen, rupee, doesn't matter. They are looking to drive hard cash. And this is where shared services has a very common story with post M&A or ERP consolidation. It's all about taking hard currency, hard dollar, euro, etc., off the table through reduced inventory, lower cost, more efficient, and more sales. So when we look at the data quality checklist, right, we've sort of defined what drives some of these triggers, and then how these triggers create an enhanced or a more apparent need for master data quality improvement. Unless you've already got that team in place and they're happy and peppy and ready to go, odds are you're going to look for a partner to help you go down this path. Now, of these, the 8 or so choices up on screen, there are 4 that jump to mind for us. And this is because, well, one, we tend to focus on the hard ROI. So rather than help organizations look at the how am I going to sell more, because there's all sorts of things that can be risky on sales increase. You're pretty sure you can get an upsell. You're pretty sure you get a cross sell. But it's cloudy and it's Thursday and nobody signed any purchase orders this month. There are things that can impact forecastable sales. There are much fewer variables, and they're much more concrete and I'll say deterministic when it comes to reducing your costs. These are also the things generally that CFOs can get their arms around. So I tend to jump at intellectual property, accuracy, automation, and speed. These are the things that drive success for large, complex organizations, because in order to turn a solution around quickly and therefore minimize cost to you, the customer, speed matters. You can't be fast unless you're accurate. If you're fast and inaccurate, you don't help anybody. And to be speedy and accurate, you need to automate a solution. That automation brings consistency. But that automation also requires intellectual property, someone who knows the domain and who has taken that knowledge of, let's say, the material master or the product master and embedded it within the automation. There's also a commonality across most major customers. I'd say 80% common buy-side components. So industry expertise is not quite as critical. I'd say it's probably number 5 on that list. But as you become more specialized or you become more focused, let's say you're a utility company or you're an oil and gas company, that's where industry expertise levers into speed, because the ability to reuse or to lever industry expertise through the automation contributes to a faster and more accurate rollout. Business model, access to top management, corporate focus on material data quality, all good stuff. Don't get me wrong. Business model, of course, is will they align with your requirements? Are they that flexible? And access to top management, really, this is a mission critical thing for you. But as I said before, this is between 3 and 10% of your ERP budget. You're going to want someone who's accountable. It may not be a huge sum of money to you, but it's important that it work because it's leveraging the rest of your investment. And that means you need access to the executives and the folks with skin in the game. And yes, that's a shameless plug for us because, well, I am one of the founders. So you've gone down a path, you've selected a vendor, and the next step really is either measuring the success of a project once you're finished, or perhaps prejudging the value of a data quality improvement project. So there's a couple of, I'll say dimensions or measure groups that you want to get your arms around and you want to be able to quantify. All right, so one is, how long is it going to take to get this taken care of? And the second one is, what percentage of the problem is it going to solve? If I can do 20% in 2 weeks, is that better or worse than 70% in a month? Or 98% in 2 months? So stand-up speed versus categorized or captured data is a lever around ROI in terms of percentage of value gotten, right? If I'm only at 20% of my data, I may only be at 20% of my ROI. Likely it's much less than that. Cost, of course. How much for partners? How much for the tool? How much for your people who are going to be involved? And that gets you into the next two, implementation and training, which are generally either 20/20 over the shoulder, seeing what you've already done, or this is something you're going to capture through the reference check. For this implementation, how easy was it for someone of same size, similar skills? What kind of positives, what kind of negatives came out of this? Was it all a dream or was it a little bit of a nightmare? But you want to quantify this and be fully, aware, eyes wide open. Training time. If your team's going to get involved, if you're going to collaborate on this versus just sort of do the stamp at the end. Again, check through the references. How much did it take to train? Was the training effective? Did they train me a year in advance and then I forgot it all? I mean, these are things that you want to get a good handle on because they will help you ascertain the third item, cost. And then the big one, ROI. And again, we tend to, we being VERDANTIS, focus on ROI factors and ROI formulas that can stand the test of a very gnarly, grumpy chief financial officer. This should be same goods, same value, or same quantity, year-over-year improvement. Reduction in inventory, same facilities, plus liquidation value, carry cost of money. We want stuff that you can do in Excel, to be able to prove out the value. And we do. So let's take a couple of minutes and go through some sort of typical case studies. And then our fourth will be an in-depth ROI. So as we run through this, and again, as a reminder, please put your questions into chat. We'll try to answer these as we end up. And again, anything that's specific, especially as you see some of these case studies, if it's not appropriate for everyone, we'll follow up almost immediately with a personal email outreach or phone call. So the first client case we'd like to bring to your attention, this is the world's largest sugar refinery. You have probably used their brand in your tea, coffee, or iced tea, depending on where you happen to be today, or lemonade if it's warm. From a perspective of mergers and acquisitions, this organization had done 3 fairly large, for them, major acquisitions in the course of 18 months. Their operational footprint is 30 plants across 5 time zones in 6 countries, North and South America plus Europe. Total lines of information, and this is just their material master, 215,000 for their initial aggregation. Every month, though, they're adding about 3,000 new items. They're very dynamic. The final resulting ERP EAM landscape was 2 SAP instances. In this case, one for the Americas and one for Europe. Challenging part of this at first was the amount of detail in their data and the fact that it had to be generated afresh in English, Latin American Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese. This particular client was both a data harmonization, so data cleansing, normalization, categorization, attribution, deduplication, but also a customer for our data governance solution, which provides ongoing data stewardship and data governance. The result was that a centralized team is now able to maintain global standards for master data management. This global team consists of 2 people. They have taken the material creation timeline, which prior to this implementation ran anywhere from days to as much as a week and a half, and had this successfully reduced to, on average, less than 3 hours and a maximum of 1.5 days. In addition to this process improvement, there was a reduction of inventory and remote support and collaboration across all 30 locations by this very small, centrally managed team. Hard ROI, in addition to the initial inventory savings, has translated to less inventory carry because of the just-in-time fulfillment through a more accurate material master. And the fact there's no longer a delay in item creation has helped the current materials team reduce active inventory because there's no longer stockpiling for the occasional outage or team member on vacation. Our second case study is a slightly smaller organization. Several of our account people love this account because this company is in the baked goods and comfort food business, and whenever you leave, their security guard hands you a box of something, which makes for a very pleasant plane ride back. Or in my case, I make lots of friends at the airport. Anywho, about 5 years ago, a team had come in and manually cleansed their operations data. So this was their repair, operations, and maintenance masters. They were using two different systems, Maximo and MPAC, and they were adding a relatively slow volume, or I say slow or low volume, between 3,000 and 3,500 items per year. This doesn't sound like it should get ugly or should get nasty. Yet, because they had two systems, these incremental additions were done haphazardly, right? Through nobody's fault. But they had no initial taxonomy. They had a limited data template for describing items. And what they were able to do with our harmonized process was that we were able to give them a visible taxonomy or hierarchy based on the United Nations Standard Product and Services Code, and further defined an ontology or naming convention, including technical attributes or characteristics for 1,400 distinct categories. Bringing this kind of structure enabled them to consolidate into a single instance of an EAM, and that single instance was both credible for the operations and material handling people, as well as business ready for the procurement team. Tangible results in the first 12 months was a reduction in plant floor outage, reduction of inventory, approximately 7%. The reduction in inventory freed up cash in terms of working capital. And they were able to increase spend under management through procurement control to drive volume level discounts. Now, if you want to crank up the volume a little bit, this is a European headquartered company who did a number of acquisitions in the United States. I think in the course of 14 months, they acquired 5 companies. The 5 companies they bought had a total of 18 different ERP or EAM platforms. And for those of you who are curious, those were 9 different branded ERP or EAMs, and a couple had multiple versions, thus the 18. Total count of active materials, 1.3 million records, and those are active. They had no corporate classification or categorization for the materials that they bought for both direct material, this is component parts, as well as operational. And there was no defined naming convention, no protocol for describing parts or specifying technical characteristics or attributes. So the level of duplicates within business units and then among business units and among systems was something to be addressed. The benefits, and I'll separate them here between the initial sort of data scrubbing and the data governance. From a data cleansing, the data harmonization, was that we're able to provide consistent and actionable information. This allowed them to improve their supply and spend management. Most importantly, I think it enabled them to standardize parts, and that led to a lean inventory. Once you can get into that sort of Six Sigma lean environment, you know that it's not just a 12-month or a 24-month ROI, but we're looking at permanent change. The process standardization around data governance, because they too were a data governance solution partner for us, drove significant continuous improvement in their workflow. This enabled the reduction and elimination in many ways of duplicate data entry. And the interface into any remaining systems was automated to eliminate all duplicate keystroking and therefore any introduction of manual error. So as you can see, case studies sort of run through that M&A, through the process improvement and ERP or EAM consolidation run. And for those of you who are interested, we can share more about specifics offline. So sort of wrapping up with a real life ROI, and those of you who have your calculators handy to double check our numbers, always welcome it. Organization does $8 billion in revenue. They've got $8 billion in operations, maintenance, and repair. So this is sort of non-direct material, but operational material spending. They currently run $400 million in inventory. They had approximately 400,000 items post the initial merge of systems. The harmonization event in terms of the normalization, deduplication, cleansing, etc., reduced the item count from 400,000 to 340,000 unique items. For those of you who are checking numbers, that's a 15% reduction in SKU. However, it was only a 10% reduction in inventory value. Now, how does this reduction materialize itself in actual hard, in this case, hard dollar ROI? Well, 400 million in inventory with a 10% duplication means that there's 40 million in duplicate inventory that and I didn't include it here in the math, doesn't have to be bought this year. We know it's duplicate. Whatever that burn down rate is, we're covered. There's 40 million that we don't have to spend. That's easy pickings. However, the inventory carry cost, 4.4% of 40 million, is 1.7 million net new savings direct to the bottom line. This is a CFO write-off. Now, against 8 billion, 1.7 doesn't sound great. Okay, look, $1 million here, $1 million there, pretty soon you're talking real money. But what happens when we look at that broader impact, right? So if we kept the 40, we'd actually be at 41. We look at 1 billion in maintenance, repair, and operations, and the ability to leverage across that 15% additional addressable spend. What this means, quite simply, is that there's 150 million that we did not know about that can now be managed by the procurement and sourcing teams at this client. Industry average, once you start running sourcing events on a commodity, you can expect to save 12.5%. We've got 15% that was unknown prior, that has now been identified for action by the sourcing and procurement team, the purchasing department. That did net 12.5% savings on 150 million or an incremental $18 million. Right, that brings our running total here to 19.7 plus the initial 40. Right, so that's 69. And then the ongoing. Right, how do we look at data governance in an environment like this? We've reduced inventory. We've helped with an initial source. How does this continue? So here's where the math gets a little more challenging. Right, what we've said is that 80% of that 1 billion operations expense is currently covered by preferred or pre-negotiated contracts. This is a fairly organized client, by the way. By improving the data catalog for Material Master in this sort of domain space, it decreases the maverick spend, or the percentage of time that people go away from the procurement and catalog and head out to just, call people they know, literally, right? So we're looking at a decrease from 40 to 25%. That's a net increase of 15% gain in compliance. That's an additional 120 million, right? 15% of 800 that is brought into sourcing for the very first time. By bringing this into pre-negotiated contracts, industry average is 16.5% when it's on contract versus off. Net savings of 16.5% gain on 120 million of spend is an incremental 19.8. So the combined annualized net cost reductions, 39.5 million, plus the 40 million we didn't have to spend. So we're looking at a 12 to 18 month ROI. In this case, it was actually a 14-month payout of just shy of 80 million US. So with that, I'll give a little bit of our sort of advert while I start to queue up on the questions. A little bit about VERDANTIS. We've been in this space for a dozen years. We are pretty darn sure that we have got very solid expertise in material part master for global organizations, as well as those that are at the bottom end of the Fortune 500 in the US. We have this expertise in material parts classification and data attribution. You'll find that our solutions harmonize and integrity. Harmonize for bringing data together and harmonizing it, thus the name, as well as integrity, which is the data governance platform to ensure that going forward, you are not putting any duplicate data and that you are keeping your material master or product master or part master as pristine as it was when we were finished with the harmonization process. Both of these solutions are served up or delivered software as a service through hosting centers in the US and Europe. And that integrity leverages the learnings, the training, and the algorithms and patterns determined during the harmonization process to provide a very quick stand-up data governance solution that is both flexible and integrates into your existing ERP or EAM landscape. With that, I'm going to pause the presentation and take a look at the chat windows here in terms of questions. Bear with me. Let me see here. 2 questions. Okay, I've got 1 question. Can we talk about how VERDANTIS would help in sustaining master data cleansing effort post-implementation? Great question. That is specific to our integrity product. I mentioned 2 of our case studies were also integrity users. Integrity is a data governance solution set that is optimized for material product and part. It supports the creation of new items as well as multi-platform search through a single sort of console. It includes a workflow for approval. It's highly configurable and is currently in its 14th release. So it's been GA or generally available to the market for 7 years. We've been running about 2 releases per year. We'll certainly follow up with the specifics and happy to set up a downstream demo. Got another question here. Okay, if growth has been by acquisition and 2 organizations have unique location numbers and no central number, oh, very nice, this is very specific. How do you handle part number assignment in that environment? Wow, this is, okay, I'm not used to getting specific questions, but here's the answer. I'd say 75% of our customers, 3 out of 4, when they go through a merger or acquisition or even just a business consolidation, there is a sense of legacy at each facility sometimes. So depending on the EAM, this will be down at the plant level. What integrity does when new items are being created is create a net new master number, but also incrementally create new plant or ERP specific instance numbers so that you don't necessarily need to go big bang, change everybody's numbers. So that's the easy answer. Now, the one that I prefer, and I like to get our customers thinking about, and in a real hard way, or at least our prospects, and in this case, right, is that what I'd like to do is start to move towards that, universal or enterprise level anyway, item number, but bring the old item numbers from the legacy system into what we call colloquials. In other words, I can still look up old material numbers, and when I look for them, whether it be by number or by manufacturer part number pair, or even abbreviation or local sort of tribal slang, return back the correct centralized part number. So I can either support legacy information or I can use it and then try to change behavior. So either way works absolutely, absolutely well. Someone just raised another question. Can I speak about healthcare, health system experience that you may have had? Healthcare is one of those places where I'd love to be, or we've liked to be for a couple of different things. What I find, though, is material management from a material master perspective. Inventory control, inventory location, for instance, in healthcare requires a reasonable level of categorization. One of the customers that has used our categorization engine is the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and we did that prior to our spin-out as VERDANTIS. What's interesting there is, I guess, the spend was about $22.6 billion. The item masters 1.2 million SKUs, active and inactive. We have a current customer today. They are a GPO, Group Purchasing Organization, and they provide managed contract data services, basically, or contract aggregation services to, I believe, 80% of the hospitals in the continental United States. And they are using our solution, Harmonize, as a self-service software deployment so that they are cleansing their catalog every day of the week. And they are doing that full time. So the thing that most people think would trip up the software is the unique technical attributes of medical surgical data, but no different than, deep sea seismic sensors or satellite reflector systems for a aerospace company. Data is data, patterns are patterns. Our software is AI-based and self-learns. So long story short, love the space. We're happy. They're happy. We can certainly cover that downstream. I probably have just time for maybe one more. This way I can let everybody off before the top of the hour. Let me see. With recent financial constraints, it's become increasingly hard to get money out of my company. I like this. How do you suggest a business case be built? I went through a very high-level ROI with that last client. I can, off the top of my head, think of 3 specific customers whom we engaged early on to sort of do a proof of concept, pilot, if you will, on a couple of categories or a couple of plants or a couple of facilities to do a data quality assessment to say, okay, if you were to clean up your data, what kind of value could it bring? And this requires a little bit of trust on everyone's part, right? Because we would need to see inventory or price data. We can certainly help you do that, though, if you want to maintain anonymity there. With that, and as long as it's a good sample, we can extrapolate into a larger, albeit factored, value proposition. One of our longstanding customers, I'm not going to give you their name, but we had started off, and the base assessment looked like it was going to be as much as $46 million in savings after the first year. We were very cautious with this customer because that was well over 10% of their inventory value. And what we wanted them to understand was that's what could possibly happen. We worked with them. We factored that down, sort of dialed back expectations, something just under 20. Their team came in at 9 months post go live. So they hadn't gone the full year, but at 9 months, their number was 26. And at 12, the number was 32. At 32, they were twice the number that they had promised to their financial organization. They were heroes. I mean, I don't mean to make that sound glamorous, right? But they were very well respected. It did well for their team. They delivered more than they had committed to. I'm a big fan, and the company of VERDANTIS overall, we are huge fans of not stretching. Data is data. Value is value. Let's take the data, determine what potential value is, and make sure that together as a group, we hit those numbers. With that, unless there are any, hold on. I see some specifics about, does VERDANTIS have previous experience with MDG, not MDM? Our integrity product, as mentioned, is compatible, compliant, and integrates with pretty much everything coming out of our friends in Waldorf. So SAP MDM, SAP MDG, the business objects version of MDG as well as PI, XO, etc. Likewise, Oracle, anything dropping out of the Maximo team from IBM, Ellipse, etc. So that's going to sound like an advertisement. Heck of a good spot to pause and go back and just say thank you. Again, all of your questions are being logged. Anything I didn't respond to, me or someone on the team will certainly come back to you in the next 24 hours or so. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again from VERDANTIS. This is Arthur Roget signing off.